Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Cyber Coast to Coast. This is one of your hosts, Scott Schober, from the East Coast here out of central New Jersey at our company's headquarters, Berkeley Varitronic Systems. I'm joined by my partner and brother, Craig Schober, from the West Coast. How you doing there, Craig?
Okay, Scott. Hope everyone out there is doing well. And as Scott said, I'm coming from Long Beach, California, on the West Coast. And if you could hear that cough, I think Scott's getting over something. So apologies for any coughing during this episode.
Yeah. Thanks. Sorry about that, everyone. I had COVID the other week, a couple of weeks ago, coming back, probably during or coming back from RSA, maybe the plane or something like that. The big RSA security show was in San Francisco, and several of my colleagues there also seemed to have come down with COVID. But not only did I get it, but also my wife and two children at the same time. And I already had a sinus infection prior to that, and then another sinus infection. So I kind of got three waves of breathing challenges and coughing, and it seems like this one's lasting here. So again, I mentioned that because that's one of the reasons why the last few weeks you haven't heard Cyber Coast to Coast. We've been dealing with several different things and some personal family issues too. So it's been difficult, but we're glad to be back and glad to be here with you, Craig. And I wanted to just make mention and thank our sponsor, which is Dark Kryptonite. And Dark Kryptonite stops ransomware, malware, and phishing in their tracks, eliminating cybercrime, fraud, and information warfare. Excuse me. Dark Kryptonite utilizes advanced blockchain algorithms and zero trust models. You can learn more about them at darkkryptonite.com, and that's kryptonite spelled with a C. So check out their website for some of the exciting stuff that they're doing. We got three great stories here. Maybe I'll just give a quick rundown of what we're going to chat about, and that way if somebody does want to hear about a particular story and they want to go right to it in the podcast, they can do that if they have particular interest. The first one comes from CyberScoop, and it's talking about Ukrainian cybersecurity officials disclose two new hacking campaigns that are happening. So we'll dive into that a little bit and some of the specifics and who's behind it. The second story comes from the Hacker News. Europol busts phishing gang responsible for millions in losses. So we're going to talk a lot about phishing today. And then the final story there is coming from Pixem Security, and it's kind of an update on a phishing story. The fish goes on, 5 million stolen credentials and counting. And we'll talk a little bit about the Facebook and the phishing campaign and all the challenges that are going on there. So some interesting stories this week. I can't say any one is better than the other. They all have some interest, and that's why we kind of like to highlight them. And then hopefully in our discussion, we can bring light to some of these and share tips from time to time as well. But maybe that's a good way just to start us off, Craig, just to share a few tips. And I'd love to get your thoughts on what you think about. Maybe to some extent, gone are the days when you receive an email, a phishing email, where it says the Nigerian prince needs you to click on the below and claim $10 million that's owed to you, so on and so forth. And it used to be that I would always encourage people, notice any type of oddity in an email that you get when you're not sure who the sender is, if there's poor spelling and grammar, if there's misspellings, incorrect grammar, the phrasing maybe is just a little bit off. Any of those type of things, they raise red flags when you're reading it. But oftentimes people wonder, are these people just, bad spellers? Are they illiterate? Are they this or that? Actually, why do they do that? Interestingly enough, in the past, a lot of it was really to bypass the spam filters. I don't think people realize that. So if they can get emails through the old school spam filters, they were successful. And a good percentage of people also looked at that and said, well, it must be legitimate. It got through my spam filter. Again, lending credibility. So that's one thing to really look for. And again, most of that, it's older types of stuff. But anything really for phishing, from a tip standpoint, if they're asking for something, send me money, any personal information that they're asking for through an email, even if, again, it looks legitimate, if they've got a link there and you were to click on it, you could examine the link first, look at the URL. If it says HTTP and that's it, and then colon //, it's probably not secure. But if it's got the S in there, that gives some credibility that there's level of security and some encryption there. So look for HTTPS is always a good best practice to look for.
Another good one. I think. Let me chime in here for a second. Is the fuse. There's always a imminent danger, imminent warning. Yeah. And I think that's a great one to keep an eye out for, because, these are purportedly, this is a Nigerian prince or some kind of organization on the other side of the world reaching out to a stranger, asking for a lot of money really soon before this window closes, and they can't get the money and they can't give you your money. And it's on when you read it, when you kind of break it down that way, on paper, it's almost absurd. When you remove the emotion from it, when you remove the urgency from it, it becomes kind of an absurd premise that they're reaching out to the stranger and they got to give you all this money before it stops. And you realize the real world, it just doesn't work like that.
That's so true. And I think maybe to add to that, when they're kind of almost demanding actions, it seems like they seem very, you can write things in big bold fonts or things. It almost like you're shouting at somebody. I almost feel like some of those, they're demanding things like a sense of urgency, as you mentioned there, or even it's like you won something that it says you've won an exclamation point, click here to redeem the prize, or we have your browser history, pay now, or we'll tell your boss. So all these spins on different things that give a sense of urgency. I'm going to get in trouble. Do this now or I'll miss out.
And we've encountered all these types of things too, even like at the car dealership. They say, oh, I can give you this deal, but the window's going to close and I can't give it to you tomorrow. And in the moment you're like, well, I got to walk away with a car. I don't want to be back here. I don't want to deal with this. I'll take their deal. But when you think about it, like, that's absurd. There's no way the deal stops now or business closing time that day. Of course they would extend it the next day if they're a normal person that wants a normal a sale and they want to have a happy customer. So it's just kind of more evidence that they're playing upon your emotions and they're playing upon illogical non-critical thinking.
And again, if something smells fishy, it probably is fishy. If it looks a little fishy, it probably is a little fishy. So excuse the puns, but it's so true. Good. So just a couple basic techniques. And of course, fraudulent email is, I should point out, and we're all realizing this, but to some degree, they're getting better and better at it. So it's harder to distinguish a legitimate email from a fraudulent email. And I was checking earlier, I was talking to a business colleague here, just looking in my junk folder, and the number of them that were labeled spam that came over just this morning, it was in excess of 300 emails. And they were attachments, all kinds of different scams, everything from the prints to you've won money to lottery, over 300 of them. And I'm going through them saying, I don't have time for this stuff. Now, fortunately, they were marked junk and flagged, but it still takes time, and you still don't want to miss maybe that critical order or critical communication that happens every once in a while that slips through and gets marked junk or something else. So it does take some discipline and effort, but with training and with time, you do get to learn to spot ones that are suspicious. And software does help too to kind of speed the process up. But nothing beats a thorough check with your eyes too, and just double check.
Yeah, and those emails, by the way, those emails that you're seeing, you're going to see a surge in spam, particularly on our server, our domain, because I recently, I for listeners that might not know, I managed a website, and update it, almost every day. And we were getting, I was missing some emails. I'm not sure if this, I think it was beyond Gmail, but I know it was a lot of Gmails for some reason. And these were legitimate Gmails, emails that I was expecting from someone or I had gotten from them in the past. And they said, hey, I sent you an email. Did you get it? I'm like, no, I did not. It's not in my junk folder. Something, it's being, this is being treated as some kind of spam, and it's being kind of cut off very early in the process. So I can't even see a spam folder with it in it. So I went into settings and realized that the spam threshold on our server was set a little too low, so it was not letting in some emails that it should definitely have been letting in. So I cranked it, I turned it up a little bit, which means, of course, we're not going to be missing as many as we might have been. But of course, that also means we're going to let in a bunch of emails that shouldn't be let in, and that's just a natural part of the training process, both for human training and the server training itself. And I'm noticing it's doing its job. I mean, I'm seeing, like you, I'm seeing dozens, if not hundreds, of junk emails marked as junk, and they appropriately are marked as junk. So far so good. It has not. I haven't seen anything junk marked as junk that should not have been.
Excellent. Yeah, that is concerning. And we're not alone. I talk to a lot of companies, and they're very frustrated with the world of email. And it's so saturated. It's the point now where the majority of emails, in other words, you send out 10 emails, the majority of those that other people are sending are junk. So yours is getting lost in the cyberspace, in a sense. So it's really changed. It used to be that you could send an email and have a level of confidence that it can get somewhere. Maybe not much unlike the U.S. postal system. You used to be able to send a letter and years back, and you knew it was going to get there. And now you spend more and more on stamps, and you kind of wonder, is it ever going to make it? Did it make it? Did it get lost? Who knows?
Right. The confidence level isn't as high as it used to be. It's complicated. I guess there's a lot of things going on in with transportation right now, and international travel, and those things, and COVID, throw that in there, and worker shortages and things like that. So it's a complicated reason why your mail, for instance, your physical packages might not get to you on time or at all. Let's hope that the bottleneck clears up soon, though.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, let's transition right into our first story there. Again, it's from CyberScoop. Ukrainian cybersecurity officials disclosed 2 new hacking campaigns. And before jumping in, I just wanted to get your thoughts. I've noticed with, maybe it's the midterm elections, maybe it's just life in general. I don't see and hear as much as we did with the conflict there, Ukraine and Russia, in the headlines as much as before. Certainly it's still there, but I was wondering, did you get the same pulse of that? Is a lot more craziness going on in the headlines that you see?
I think you're right. There's still some news organizations that just cover it daily, but it's almost like that's their mission, and they made it that, and that's great. Different editors and journalists have their kind of niche subjects, or I guess war isn't niche, but they have their favorites, or the things they're most qualified for. So there's always going to be ones that cover it on a regular basis, but I have noticed it on in general, kind of not appearing on the headlines. Like it probably had a straight month every single back 2 months ago or 3 months ago. Every single day was a new headline where you'd have Ukraine and Russia in the headline, and you knew exactly what it was going to be. The story, it was just kind of a small little update. This city has been taken. This city has been defended against. This cybersecurity attack has been noted and dealt with, and those kinds of things. But I think it is just domestic political headlines are kind of starting to take over and build up. You still have these January 6 hearings are still ongoing, so those headlines. You have a lot of stuff going on with the Supreme Court lately. So I think we're going to return back to I think the war is going to heat up again. At least in terms of the reporting on it. I don't know when it will be, but these things, they seem to come and go in waves.
Yeah.
So, and this is I guess this story represents kind of maybe the beginning of a new cybersecurity wave of the war. I don't know. Hopefully we won't see too many more of these, but.
And sometimes it's also, at least from the world of cybersecurity, there is some lows between different big trade events. Certainly coming back from RSA a couple of weeks ago, that's a lot of people that go out to RSA and tune in, and a lot of money spent there. And then it becomes a little bit lull as people get into summer, and then again in second week in August, Black Hat picks up. and then followed immediately by DEF CON both in Vegas. So I'm going to be heading out there, working with Cybercrime Magazine. So look forward to that. There's always some great shows out there, and they're a little bit smaller and more niche and focused with the hacking community, but nonetheless, they're just as important, I think, because you do learn a lot and you meet a lot of great people out at those events there. So hopefully we'll see what's going on, and I'll share some things in the months to come after covering those shows there. But with this story, it was interesting because it talks, and just to break it down a little bit, a Russian-backed hacker group launched 2 new hacking campaigns against Ukraine. So they're very targeted. And it came through fake emails that contained malware-infected files. So again, we see this often. We open our email, and whether it's marked junk or not, and you're checking it, and you see these attachments, and oftentimes it is malware, and that's why we got to be so careful. And they mentioned the cyber attack campaign. It's believed to have come from UAC 0098 and APT 28, group linked with Russian military and famously known for attacking multiple government institutions that are aligned with the West. And I've talked and reported about APT 28 a few times in the past on different radio stations and articles, this and that, but I haven't heard of UAC 0098 yet, honestly. And they mentioned the interesting part here, who they previously targeted in the article. I don't know if you caught on to that or noticed that, but one of the first ones mentioned was the White House. And then, of course, different countries, France, Germany, Norway, focused campaigns, and this one being more focused on Ukraine. And it was caught by actually Ukraine's National Cybersecurity Task Force, the CERT-UA, who actually caught and saw this happening, which was good. Good kudos to them that they actually saw it and were able to respond to it really quickly, which is, I think, very important. And I mentioned in the article there, APT 28 launched 2 different attacks. The first was noticed beginning of the week on Monday, when different organizations in Ukraine received emails from what was supposed to be the state tax authority of Ukraine. Hackers sent an email that made victims think they were being hit with tax penalties. And then, of course, once they clicked it, the file would infect the device with malware. And it's kind of interesting, but again, because what we talked about earlier with phishing, how effective it is, that giving them that sense of urgency. If you receive something and it's saying, oh, you're going to get a tax penalty, what are you going to do? You're going to go, oh, no. Oh, crap. Wait a minute. I thought I paid my taxes. I talked to my accountant or this or that. Now I owe money. What's going on here? You might be inclined out of emotion, fear, impulsive, being pushed to just click on that. So again, you see the dangers of some of these things there. And I think that's how phishing campaigns become so successful. They instill that sense of urgency, fear. Maybe it's timing and it happens to connect. You just filed your taxes recently, and now you're thinking you get a penalty because you missed something.
Yeah, I think these scammers have a real future in marketing. I mean, it's almost like it feels like they did a marketing group and said, what are the top things that would scare, Ukrainian households right now or something? And, I mean, possible tax penalties, that's going to scare anyone that pays their tax regularly. So you're not going to just trash it. You're going to look at the email. You might not click on it, but you're going to give it a look. And then I noticed in the second attack, it had a document in there, attached in there, and of course that document was full of malware. But the document was titled "Nuclear threat is a real threat." Now, there's nothing like getting a Ukrainian citizen scared by talking about a nuclear threat right next door, Russia. So they're definitely going to take a look at that too. And they, who knows how many people have clicked on these things and then had the malware installed directly onto their computers. So the scammers are definitely doing their best to get people's attention and to get those clicks.
Yeah. Yep. It's effective. Mm. Well, before jumping into our second story, let's just thanks again to our sponsor there, Dark Kryptonite. They stop ransomware, malware, and phishing in their tracks, eliminating cybercrime, fraud, and information warfare. Dark Kryptonite utilizes advanced blockchain algorithms and zero trust models. Learn more at darkkryptonite.com. And kryptonite spelled with a C. And it's interesting. We're talking about some of the great stuff Dark Kryptonite offers and does. Again, stopping malware and stopping phishing. We see in all three of these stories, it talks about some way or another phishing. So that's kind of our theme today. It goes hand in hand with that. So the next story is from the Hacker News. They put out some great content. Europol bust phishing gang responsible for millions in losses. They mentioned that Europol arrested a criminal group that used phishing and scamming to steal millions of dollars and launder money. The premier European law authority stated that of all the individuals were located in the Netherlands. So we start to appreciate the global nature of cybercrime. Oftentimes, we always associate Russia lately, the past year or so. Everything's been Russia, Russia, Russia. And a lot of things do orchestrate out of Russia. But honestly, it's maybe a little bit inflated sometimes. And before that, it used to be China, China, China. You still hear again China, and a lot of things are originated out of China, but it's not everything. So I do think there's some exaggeration from time to time, and it's hard to attribute where a lot of these campaigns come from because they cover their tracks so well. But the interesting, as the story goes on, it mentions that the group's moniker is known. The methods through which the group individually managed to steal money, including phishing, identity theft, social engineering, etc. The group contacted its victims by email and text, and then led them to a fake banking website, which I usually refer to, I guess, as a redirect, on which victims would put their personal banking information. The group managed to steal several $1 million in the process. And I've heard of this a lot of times, and I've almost been victimized by this with phone calls that start as almost a social engineering. They say, hey, I'm from your bank. I'm with the fraud department. I need you to go to this site. I just emailed you over a thing. Click on the link and go there. But they break it down first and make it a little more credible by saying, hey, Mr. Schober, this is with so-and-so bank, the fraud department, your account number ending in 095792. There's suspicious activity. We need you to go to the website quickly and validate who you are, so on and so forth. So they step you through this over the phone, which is credible because they talk the talk and they got the right buzzwords and stuff. And then they send you an email, and in the email has the link. And again, you get the email. It looks like it's from the fraud department. You see the bank's logo. The email is spoofed. It looks like it's coming from the bank. So it's all very credible. And if you go on the website, you look at the phone number, oftentimes the phone number they're calling from, 1-800, it matches what your actual bank's website is.
They could spoof the numbers now. So and we've talked about this before. It's kind of it's the opposite of multi-factor authentication. You know, they're using our old trusted landline telephone systems. They're using a text messaging network, SMS. They're using phishing websites that look exactly like the websites we frequent. And when you have two or more of those things kind of line up at the same time, your brain just goes into kind of instant credibility mode. You don't really think about it. You think of all the times, oh, I've been in the situation before when it was legitimate, and you just kind of let it go and assume that it's legitimate, you know. And it's really clever of them, of the criminals, and it's a really hard thing for a consumer to stop and think about what they're stepping into. Which of course we encourage everyone to do, but we also know a lot of times, you know, you sit in front of your computer or your phone for a long time and your brain kind of goes into autopilot, and it's very easy to slip into giving away your information. And over the phone, sometimes people want to be polite, and when somebody asks you for your social security number when they should already know what it is, or maybe that operator should not have access to that information, and yet they're asking for it, we should know better. But, you know, some people, you know, that's how social engineering works. Some people know what's right and wrong, and they still will pick the unsecure thing because for various reasons, intimidation, or they just want to be polite, or they're not thinking fast on their feet. So, you know, all these things lead to tons of phishing attacks and social engineering attacks, and ultimately identity theft.
It's true. Scary.
Yeah.
And the one thing I didn't remember to bring out in this that they were talking through the article, reading through it before, was they also, I thought was interesting, use cryptocurrency, which again is nothing new. But then I just started thinking about it. If you're a criminal, a cyber criminal, and a hacker, and your payout today is typically it's in Bitcoin, and how it affects their business model when Bitcoin has changed so dramatically. I mean, Bitcoin's trading somewhere, I forget lately, around low $20,000, $21,000 versus
about a
US dollar.
quarter, about a third of its all-time high value, right?
Yeah, I mean that's pretty scary. Where you go back a few months, and when you're hovering above, $40,000, $50,000, now you're down in the $20,000 range. It must make cyber criminals think, or at least hesitate, or change their game plan. If they were charging $1,000 in ransom or $100,000, maybe they're going to start doubling that price, or get more greedy, because they're probably justifying to themselves, geez, we're working hard, we just had our pay cut in half, this stinks. So I just thought that was interesting there. And on top of that, how many cryptocurrency exchanges and crypto coins and associated things to that have been stolen now, billions upon billions of dollars. So it's probably getting harder and harder to be a successful cyber criminal. And on top of that, the companies that are educating and taking active stances to fight back against cyber criminals, they're going to have a tough time making a buck in the not too distant future, I think.
Yeah, and it's also interesting that you bring that up with crypto prices fluctuating so much. It makes me wonder, like, are these scammers, are they hardcore crypto bros, as it were? Like, are they really in for the long haul? Do they believe, they might not believe in following the law, but I'm sure they believe in getting rich. And do they believe that the best way to do that is to buy low while crypto, is low right now, because it's only they believe it's only going to go up in price? Or is their thinking not that long term? Are they just looking to cash in real quick? It's kind of interesting, and I'm sure that the authorities look at those type of trends, and they look at specific hackers and groups of hackers, and say, these groups, maybe the work of this might be this group rather than this group, because it doesn't fit the profile. This group usually likes to work with something like crypto, knowing that they're gonna deal with it now, buy, kind of a buy low and sell high later at some later date. So it's an interesting profiling tool, I believe, that the authorities also would use.
Yeah, certainly true. Very interesting. So let's jump into our next story here. Excuse me, just again to thank our sponsor here, take a breather. Dark Kryptonite stops ransomware, malware, and phishing in their tracks, eliminating cybercrime, fraud, and information warfare. Dark Kryptonite utilizes advanced blockchain algorithms and zero trust models. Learn more at darkkryptonite.com, and kryptonite with a C there. So check them out when you get a chance. All right. And our third story there is from Pixem Security. And this is a blog, again, talking about phishing. And this is an update. The fish goes on, 5 million stolen credentials and counting. And since this one talks a little bit about Facebook, I'm curious to get some of your thoughts, because we were chatting the other day even about some of the craziness going on with Facebook. And I was talking to actually a colleague yesterday about some of this as well, and all the craziness that's going on in the Facebook platform, how some of that by appearance seems to also be bleeding over into other social media platforms as well, the likes of Twitter, and even surprisingly LinkedIn, which I guess is owned by Microsoft, has kind of changed some of the way they do things. And it looks a little more salesy. I don't know what other word to say. It's not as corporate business and focus, but I feel it's a little more salesy when you start getting spams through your your messages on LinkedIn and things like that. But again, this one here, the Facebook phishing campaign that breached millions of accounts is still active even after its discovery. In fact, they're mentioning in this article that the threat actors have actually increased their activity. PixM is a research company. They were initially reported that a massive hacking campaign affected millions of users on Facebook had been found by their research team. The company claims it reported those issues to Facebook. So they approached Facebook, said, hey, look what we discovered, guys, here. But since then, it actually has gotten worse. It's been more active in these campaigns. Does that make any sense to you? Why would Facebook not want to stop this immediately and keep their users happy?
Yeah, I can't account for that. Originally, I was looking at the story and I thought it directly related to me because I have a Facebook story of my own. Recently, we do a little bit of advertising on Facebook from time to time, not much because we're more, B2B, and I don't think of Facebook as being. I think of Facebook as being more like, they're kind of in consumers' faces as opposed to business. But I know they're, it's huge, and yeah, and I'm sure there's a B2B play there. But so I dip my toe in once in a while and do little ads, usually for our books and things like that, because people are always recommending books on Facebook, and I figure that that's a good target audience. But we, with our recent kind of development, the AirTag and personal tracker detection for Bluetooth low energy devices, I thought, okay, this might be, I might get some good eyeballs seeing our ad and our video that we made for it, because that stuff it's still in the news. It doesn't dominate the headlines at this moment, but it keeps coming back in the news with all the Apple AirTags and things like that. So I placed an ad for I placed an ad on Facebook, just like I think it was like a $50 ad or something. And I think I even used one of their promotions. One of their promotions going around, and this is a legitimate Facebook promotion. If you spend whatever, $50, we'll give you $25 free in ad credits, something like that. So I said, all right, I might as well try it. I do one of these. Yeah, once every like 4 or 5 months, I'll do a little Facebook ad test and just to see what happens. And the ad, excuse me, the ad ran for about 3 or 4 days until I got an I got an email from actually it looked like it was from Facebook. I didn't even look at the URL, but my eyes immediately went to some of the body of the text. And that is, let me see, I had the email right here. Your ad has, of course, it's got the Facebook logo and all that stuff, and it's got a link directly to my page. It wasn't sending me elsewhere. It's legitimately sending me to Facebook, to my ad, to my post, I should say. So, and if I'm already logged in, then it's just going to send me to my ad. But it said, your ad has been reported for violating Facebook terms of service. You have 2 copyright strikes, and will disable your ad account page. To prevent that from happening, use the form below to submit an appeal. So it takes you, it's strange because it took, I didn't go to the link directly because I'm just, by habit, I'm like, I co-host a cybersecurity podcast and wrote some, co-authored some cybersecurity books. So if I'm clicking on links, then I'm not doing my job. I'm not doing it right. So but I did go into Facebook, the way I normally go, and looked at the ad, and I couldn't find the problem. I was like, well, the ad doesn't seem to appear to be turned off, and I'm not seeing any usually you see like little exclamation points or warnings, or you got something in your inbox saying, we need to have a word with you because you violated the terms of service or whatever. And I had every reason to believe that this could be legitimate, because I've never gotten a scam phishing email about copyright strikes. I haven't, I'm sure others have had. I've gotten those, but it's the first time I've gotten that. So that kind of piqued my interest. And we've gotten many of those before that were, they weren't scams. They were legitimate. They were, because you grab pictures on YouTube and you do posts on Facebook, and, you're half of the time, it's so hard to keep track of your copyright violations or potential violations. And the way these systems work, anyone can report a copyright violation, pretty much. And so these things come up when you post a lot of content on social networks. So I thought there was a chance that it was legitimate. But it turns out I couldn't find any real problem with my ad. So what the next step was, I went to Google and I said, I typed in a few keywords,
Mhm.
copyright, Facebook term of service violation, scam, things like that. And sure enough, I found a couple people reporting on a scam, looked similar to mine. So finally, for my own education, I said, okay, this is just a link. It's going to it might take me somewhere I don't want to be. So long as I don't enter in full information or don't install or download an executable file or anything like that, I think I'm in the clear. So my curiosity got the best of me, and I clicked on the link to see where it would take me. And it took me into something that looked pretty legitimate. It was a form that wanted information about me to kind of contest the possible copyright strike violation. And some of the form fields were pretty benign, like what's your name and stuff like that, but other ones were pretty specific, and they were information. More importantly, they were information that Facebook should have known already. In other words, I was logged in to my Facebook account, and yet it was asking me for my username and password to Facebook, which didn't seem like it didn't seem like a standard thing it would ask on any kind of form, especially for this type of a kind of complaint, or when you're trying to tell your side of the story to against any complaint that came over for your account or your post or whatever. So red flags started going up, and and then this is the most embarrassing thing. I then looked back at the original email, and I noticed that it started off all this with "Hello, dear." And I was like, how could I have missed? I wasted all this time like going through all these things and checking it, and then after all that, like the "Hello, dear," that's the dead giveaway. That's like who like it was a fairly sophisticated phishing attack, I thought, until I saw the "Hello, dear," and then I'm like, why did they do that? Like they couldn't fish my name out of a database. They are sending it to me. So how did they not know my name? Why would it just do a blanket "Hello, dear" for all these people they're trying to attack and get to click on their stupid form and fill out their information? Like if they would have put "Hello, Craig," or even "Hello, Facebook user," that would have probably netted about a million more people. So I can't explain. I feel sorry for these guys sometimes, even though they're scumbags and crooks, and
Yeah.
gotta
Well,
you
although
gotta
that
wonder.
being said, maybe they did such a good job with the body of the email to instill a sense of maybe fear and convince you enough that you just overlook the obvious. People that are busy and do a lot of email typically don't read all the email.
Hmm.
They scan through, and they, in a sense, were like, like an artificial intelligence. We could pull out the key pieces and ignore the majority of the body of things and still get the sense of it. Hey, this is legit, or this is a scammer. Hey, this is going to require me to print something out, or this is going to require a response. So in our minds, we're kind of very quickly sorting through content. And in the process of that, we might be on the phone, somebody walking by or talking to us while we're doing all these things. So even though we don't truly multitask as people, maybe we're kind of trying to do that. And in the process, you're ignoring the "Hello, dear" and the other stuff that are really tells that someone else might have flagged and stopped proceeding. I don't know.
Yeah, and there's definitely some laziness on my part too. I'll cop to, because I originally saw this message on my phone. Now, if anyone, I don't know if this is the case for Android Mail, but I just use Apple Mail on my iPhone, and with Apple Mail, it how when you have an email and it has the actual email address is different than your name. Well, of course, for some reason, Apple makes it you have to do an extra click to see who actually sent you the email. So from the what I saw was facebook.com. It came from facebook.com. But as you know, when you drill down a little deeper with these emails, that's not the actual email address. It would come from, if it was a legitimate one from Facebook, it would come from, I don't know, advertising.facebook.com or admin.facebook.com, whatever. I don't know what they use. But this one, all I saw was facebook.com. Now, if on iPhone, if you hold down on the link, it will then kind of go into the contact app, and then you'll see the actual email it came from. And in this case, it came from gongo375 at oceore.com, whatever, right there, that's an instant red
Red
flag.
flag.
Yeah, and you're like, okay, that's bogus. Why would Facebook ever send that? Delete, ignore, but I couldn't see that. So my laziness in not wanting to just do that one kind of extra click to see what the email, who the actual source was, that was I'm partly to blame too. But I would hope that in the future, Apple and anyone else who doesn't make that kind of stuff very transparent, very clear who's sending it to you. Because on their desktop systems, I use Apple Mail too, and you can instantly see who's it from. It's much clearer, and it doesn't involve kind of jumping out from one app into a different app and copy pasting and scrolling down this long URL to make sure that every character in the domain is the same as the domain you're expecting to go to, and all those things. So let's hope that they keep improving user interfaces so that lazy people like me have it a little bit easier.
Yeah, I think you're not alone though. I mean, I've been guilty of it too, and sometimes I look back and I've done, oh geez, why didn't I spot this or spend a minute more checking? And I now routinely tend to dig in a little bit deeper, partly out of maybe cyber curiosity, but and look at the header information, look at the raw source, try to say, was I expecting this email? Where did it come from? What do they want me to click on? Is this legit or not? Like, I'm trying to do a better job of that continually. I've been very fortunate and not been victimized lately by a lot of these scams, but maybe it's from the past paranoia where I take the time to do it. I don't think the average person has the time or the wherewithal to honestly look at the header information and click on the email and see if it's spoofed and try to figure it out. They just, if it looks like junk and they don't want it, they delete it. If it looks legit, they click on it, they open it, they read it and give it 2 seconds and move on to the next thing, because time is money for a lot of people in the world of business. It's tough. And I think part of the challenge when we look at companies such as Facebook, when you've got so many billions of users around the globe, and they have breaches where there's millions upon millions of accounts, as in this story talks about, it happens so many times, you become numb to it. I have a Facebook account, and I often will laugh and look at it, and people that I know have known for 10, 20, 30 years want to, become friends on Facebook or whatever. And they'll write you something very generic, or you just receive the invite and you're like, oh yeah, I know them. Sure. But not realizing their account was taken over. And what they basically did was change the password. Somebody takes over their account, and now they go out to all their friends and then want to reconnect with them and try to do the same thing and take over your account and make connections and garnish information, steal credentials, so on and so forth. And they've got these campaigns, and they could do it all day long, and people just click, because nobody's got time to really dig in and check, is this legitimate? Well, I see the picture, it looks like my friend. That's what they look like. Of course it's real. That's what you're thinking. But you go down that scary path very quickly. And in this story, they also talked about they're really targeting the mobile browsers, which I think is interesting, because there is a big shift in that. If you think about it, I was thinking about it going to the RSA show. This was the first time that I was extremely dependent on my mobile phone. I used my mobile phone far more than my laptop, which is interesting. And why? Because it's so easy to make calls, text, send emails, open documents. You can do so many things from your phone, just like you can on a laptop, but it's smaller. It lasts all day long with the battery, and it's just convenient. So I think phones are getting better and better, that there's less dependency from in the mobile world of using in a tablet or a laptop or anything like that. So I think that's where the shift is going to happen. The shift is going to be toward smartphones more and more, to try to compromise people's information, phishing attacks, be it for smishing attacks, phishing attacks, whatever the attack is, it's going to be more and more difficult to spot, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been, advertising with AdWords for the past 15 years, and just seeing that shift. They give you the breakdown of where your ad dollars are used most. And I remember back, 15, 12, 10 years ago, even, it was, 75% desktop and
Yeah.
25% mobile. Now that's completely flip-flopped and even gone further. I'm seeing some of our ads are just served 90% mobile,
Wow.
and desktop stuff's almost not a factor anymore. It's insane how that works. And I don't I mean, I don't know if I'd say I'm a big phone user. Um, but I guess I um surf, regular sites, and on the phone, and I see plenty of ads, but I always assume that I see that most people get their work done on computers and desktops, but every time I see the breakdown, I'm always proved wrong, and realize so many people are just on the go. So many people trust their phones as their They might have another computer or two, but they use their phone more as a primary computer because they always have it with them. And it's the same thing as what they say about cameras. The best camera is the one you have on you, the one that gets the picture. And if someone's trying to get a hold of you, what are you going to have on you? You're not going to have your laptop on you, most likely. 24 hours a day, you're going to have your phone in arm's reach, and that's how people are going to get to you.
Yeah, so true. Yeah. And just kind of circulating back to this article here, they also talked about that the company estimated that at least 400 unique domains remain in circulation, many of them reaching 1 million visitors each day, and at least 5 million people had their credentials stolen so far, but the number could potentially be much higher due to the difficulty in proving every case. Meta, which is Facebook, has not commented on the situation so far. I think you mentioned this point earlier. I don't know if it was when we started this or right before that's launching the podcast today. That Facebook is just been dealing with so many different things lately, and it just goes on and on.
Mm.
And I start to ask myself, at some point, doesn't the brand start to deteriorate to the point where people really abandon it? I mean, to some degree, the younger generation already has, and they've migrated to Facebook's other platform, Instagram. but
Right.
but to some
Or
degree,
TikTok, yeah.
yeah, or TikTok or whatever the latest and greatest. But some degree, it's got to really start hurting you, and they're taking hit after hit, and then you add into their privacy issues and lawsuits, and the list goes on and on.
Mm.
Is Zuckerberg going to be in trouble soon?
Well, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, they kind of made their own problem. I mean, what does Facebook do? Their brand is getting tarnished. So what do they? So they rebrand to Meta. But when they're all this rebranding to Meta, costing them billions, creating market confusion, and it's also uh, I'm sure it's taking its toll on Facebook engineers because they got their hands full with all this new, this kind of metaverse VR stuff, and they're taking their eye off the ball. I think they're taking their eye off of security. They're not looking at the harm that their social media network is doing on a regular basis to people, in addition to the harm that all the scammers coming on board are doing it. I mean, we're Kelly and I are in the process of selling our stuff and moving actually back to the East Coast for a little bit, and we're using Facebook Marketplace to do a lot of this stuff because it's just got it's got a critical base of users. A lot of them are local, so you could have a lot of local transactions going on, which gives me kind of a level of security. I mean, yeah, they might know where you live, but when nothing beats a face-to-face transaction to kind of root out who the scammers are versus who the real people most likely are.
Yeah.
And so you have this kind of local system through Facebook. But before you get to that point, of course, you make the initial contact through Facebook, and people say, "Oh, I'll give you, you're asking $25, I'll give you $20, that kind of stuff." And sure enough, we're trying to sell a few items. Some items are higher ticket, and the scammers are coming out of the woodwork, and they're all trying these weird shipping schemes. They start by, real friendly, saying, oh yeah, they take your first price, they don't negotiate, there's a red flag. And
Mm.
then they kind of change the terms a little bit from, oh, I'll pick it up locally, to, hey, let's do a shipping thing instead, and I'll reimburse you the money to ship it to me. And you're like, yeah, but you're from an account that claims to be located down the block. Why are
Wait a
you,
second.
why are you shipping? Why are you getting shipping involved? This makes no sense. And so a couple of them, we call them out on it, when they actually had the nerve to call us back, because we would say, get lost, scammer, we don't want to deal with you anymore, we're going to block you. But we already, maybe exchange numbers or something. So now they have the number and they're calling, and we're just like, we just hang up on them and block their calls and stuff like that. So my long convoluted story just goes to show that I think part of Facebook's problem is the meta rebranding
Mhm.
and all the kind of confusion that causes. And they're not doing their job to the fullest, because, as we know, they're here to make money, and they're here to show Wall Street that that the metaverse has a big future. And whether that's true or not, that means they're always going to give kind of short shrift to the current customers, the current standards, in lieu of future profits that they're chasing.
Yeah, yeah. And they are hit with, and this is not a Facebook bash, but it's so easy to, because they just seem to have grown so much that they dominate so many different conversations and it affects so many people's lives. But at the same time, they have made some blunders, and the media gets a hold of a lot of the stuff and it goes crazy. I know recently, just a couple weeks ago, I remember reading about their chief operating officer,
Sheryl
who was,
Sandberg.
yeah, she's very well known and this and that, and she stepped down. They've got a lot of challenges with fake posts, irrelevant posts. They want to step in and try to control some of that. Let's say there's the whole political landscape of censorship and not censorship, selling of data, Cambridge Analytica, and all the, scam after scam, breach after breach, hack after hack. You can only have so much money where you could fight all this. Eventually, I think it's going to start taking its toll. And I'm trying to think of what was the competitor to Facebook a long time ago. What was the other social media platform?
MySpace, I guess, was
MySpace.
right
Yeah.
before them. Yeah.
I have not heard. I'm sure it still exists. I don't know who owns it, if they still are the same platform or not. It's interesting, but I have not heard about MySpace in years. I don't know anybody that uses it. And yet, at the time, I heard about them as much as Facebook or any other social media. So things come and go in this world so quickly. And if you get a black eye or make a couple mistakes, the industry pounds you for it. So you really have to be
Mm.
careful and work hard every day to keep your brand and your business solid. That's why I sit there and ask myself, why in the world would they justify changing their name from Facebook to Meta when you've got a household name that everyone knows, and now suddenly you're trying to reinvent yourself a little bit for the future that's coming but not here yet? Just seems like an expensive gamble.
Mm.
Who knows?
Absolutely.
But at least we're not working in Facebook's marketing department or and have to answer to anybody. But it is interesting how things are changing so quickly in this world,
Absolutely.
and not for the better. So, any event, that's that story there. Again, the 5 million stolen credentials and counting, some of the challenges that they're dealing with, and just to take a moment and thank our sponsor again. Dark Kryptonite stops ransomware, malware, and phishing in their tracks, eliminating cybercrime, fraud, and information warfare. Dark Kryptonite utilizes advanced blockchain algorithms and zero trust models. Learn more by going to their website, darkkryptonite.com. And kryptonite is with a C. Learn more about some of the great stuff that organization is doing. And they just updated their website. I was checking it out a couple of days ago, so I encourage people to stop by and take a look see. And maybe just some house cleaning and reminders for people that this podcast, it's available everywhere on YouTube, Spotify, Google, iHeart, Apple, Amazon, and more. If you like what you hear, we encourage people, please subscribe and give our podcast a review. Good, bad, or ugly. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know. If you have questions and comments, you can DM us on Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter every day. My account is at ScottBVS, or you can even go to my website, scottschober.com, for more information. Simple little form that you could fill out there. And we promise we will not email you to death or spam you to death, but we will read your comments and get back to you, or questions if you have questions. And of course, if we read your comment or question on the podcast, we'll send you a choice of a signed copy of one of our books, Hacked Again, Cybersecurity is Everybody's Business, or Senior Cyber. So again, from the East Coast, I want to thank everybody for listening and tuning in. We encourage you to tune in next week for another new episode that will be packed with cyber news. We'll share another tip for the week, and hope that everybody stays safe and has a great weekend ahead of them. This is Scott Schober signing off from the East Coast.
And this is Craig Schober signing off from the West Coast. Everyone stay safe.
With your hosts, Scott and Craig Schober.